The sun was just beginning to rise over the historic city of Vienna, casting a golden glow on its cobblestone streets and grand buildings. The air smelled faintly of freshly baked pretzels wafting from nearby bakeries, mingling with the crisp morning breeze. Alex, a wide-eyed tourist from a small town, stepped out of their hotel feeling like they had landed in another world. Everything around them seemed larger than life. The towering cathedrals, the intricate statues, and the elegant horse-drawn carriages that clattered softly down the narrow lanes. Alex had dreamed of visiting Europe for years, and now, standing in the heart of Vienna, they couldn't help but feel giddy with excitement. Their camera hung heavily around their neck, ready to capture every moment of this once-in-a-lifetime trip. As they strolled through the streets, Alex marveled at how the old blended seamlessly with the new. Smartly dressed businessmen hurried past centuries-old fountains, while tourists snapped photos beside street musicians playing classical tunes on violins. By mid-morning, Alex found themselves wandering toward Schönbrunn Palace, one of Vienna's most famous landmarks. Its sprawling gardens stretched endlessly, dotted with vibrant flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. The palace itself stood majestically against the horizon, its yellow walls gleaming under the sunlight. It felt surreal to walk where emperors and queens once ruled, and Alex soaked it all in, imagining what life must have been like during those opulent times. As Alex explored further, something caught their attention. A group of royal guards mounted on horses, patrolling the grounds near the palace entrance. These weren't ordinary guards. They were part of an elite ceremonial unit known for their striking uniforms and disciplined demeanor. Each guard wore a pristine white tunic adorned with gold braiding, paired with tall black boots polished to perfection. But what truly stole the show were the horses. Powerful, well-groomed steeds, whose coats shimmered as if brushed with silk. Alex stopped in their tracks, mesmerized by the spectacle before them. To see these figures moving so gracefully, almost like characters from a history book brought to life, filled Alex with awe. They noticed how the crowd instinctively parted to let the patrol pass, some people bowing their heads slightly out of respect. Cameras clicked furiously as tourists tried to immortalize the scene. For a moment, Alex simply stood there, watching as the rhythmic sound of hooves echoed across the pavement. But curiosity soon got the better of Alex. They wanted a closer look, not just any photo, but the perfect shot that would make their friends back home jealous. Ignoring the signs warning visitors to keep their distance, Alex edged nearer to the procession, weaving between other tourists. Their heart raced with anticipation as they imagined capturing the perfect angle. The glint of sunlight on a saber, the ripple of muscles beneath a horse's coat, or maybe even a candid glance from one of the stoic guards. What Alex didn't realize, however, was that they were stepping into territory best left untouched. The guards weren't there to entertain. They were symbols of tradition and authority, tasked with protecting both the palace and its visitors. Yet in Alex's mind, the line between admiration and intrusion blurred, setting the stage for a confrontation neither of them could have foreseen. As Alex moved closer to the mounted guards, their excitement only grew. The horses were even more magnificent up close, each one radiating strength and elegance. One particular horse stood out to Alex, a sleek black stallion with a glossy coat that shimmered like polished obsidian under the sunlight. Its mane was perfectly groomed, flowing gently in the breeze as it trotted alongside its rider. To Alex, the animal looked almost magical, as though it had stepped straight out of a fairy tale or an old painting. The guard riding the black stallion seemed just as impressive. He sat tall in his saddle, his posture unwavering, exuding confidence and discipline. His uniform was immaculate, every detail, from the gold embroidery on his tunic to the shiny brass buttons, seeming to reflect years of tradition and pride. Even the way he held the reins spoke volumes about his control and connection with the horse beneath him. For a moment, Alex forgot they were standing in a bustling tourist area. It felt like witnessing history come alive. But Alex's fascination quickly turned into recklessness. Determined to capture the perfect photo, They ignored the growing distance between themselves and the rest of the crowd. Other tourists lingered respectfully behind barriers, snapping pictures from afar. But Alex pushed forward, weaving through people until they were dangerously close to the patrol. A nearby sign clearly stated, "Do not approach guards or horses," but Alex barely glanced at it. In their mind, rules like these were meant for others, not someone as daring and spontaneous as them. When the patrol slowed down near the palace gates, Alex saw their chance. They raised their camera high, angling it for the best possible shot. But instead of staying put, Alex took another step forward, then another, until they were practically at the edge of the horse's path. Some bystanders whispered nervously, urging Alex to back away. But their words went unnoticed. All Alex could think about was getting closer, to feel the power of the horse, to see the intensity in the guard's eyes, to create a story worth telling. Finally, Alex made a decision that would change everything. As the black stallion passed by, Alex impulsively reached out a hand, intending to touch its velvety nose. It was meant to be a fleeting gesture, something quick and harmless, or so Alex thought. What they failed to realize was that horses, no matter how well trained, are still sensitive creatures. The sudden movement startled the stallion, causing it to toss its head and shift uneasily beneath the guard. The guard immediately reacted, tightening his grip on the reins and speaking calmly to steady the animal. For a brief moment, chaos rippled through the scene. Nearby tourists gasped, some stepping back in alarm, while others instinctively raised their phones to record what might happen next. Alex froze, their hands still hovering awkwardly in the air, as the enormity of what they'd done began to sink in. They hadn't intended to cause trouble. They just wanted a memory, a connection to this extraordinary moment. But now, they found themselves face to face with the consequences of crossing a line they didn't fully understand. The guard dismounted swiftly, his movements fluid yet deliberate. He approached Alex with an expression that was impossible to read beneath his ceremonial helmet. Though his voice remained calm, there was an undeniable firmness in his tone as he addressed the situation. Alex tried to laugh it off, brushing the incident aside as if it were nothing more than a harmless mistake. But deep down, they couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was about to unfold, and not in a way they'd anticipated. The guard's boots clicked sharply against the cobblestones as he approached Alex, his presence commanding and unyielding. Though his face was partially obscured by the visor of his helmet, there was no mistaking the severity in his stance. Every step he took seemed deliberate, radiating authority that made even the murmuring crowd fall silent. Alex, who had initially laughed nervously at their own clumsiness, suddenly felt a knot tighten in their stomach. The playful grin they'd worn moments ago faltered as reality began to sink in. "Sir," the guard said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You are too close. Please step back immediately." His words were polite but carried an unmistakable edge, leaving no room for argument. For a moment, Alex hesitated, unsure how to respond. They glanced around, hoping someone might intervene or offer support, but the sea of onlookers only stared back, some sympathetic, others judgmental. It was clear now that this wasn't just some harmless encounter, it was serious. Alex tried to muster a casual tone, brushing off the warning with a sheepish smile. "Oh, come on," they said, chuckling nervously. "I was just trying to get a closer look. No harm done, right?" Their attempt at humor fell flat, swallowed by the weight of the situation. If anything, the comment seemed to make things worse. The guard didn't crack a smile or soften his expression. Instead, he stood taller, his gloved hands resting lightly on the hilt of his ceremonial sword, a subtle but unmistakable reminder of the power he held. "You have crossed a restricted boundary," the guard continued, his tone unwavering. "This is not a performance. These horses are highly trained, and any sudden movement can endanger both you and those around you." His explanation was calm yet pointed, designed to drive home the seriousness of Alex's actions. But Alex, still caught up in their own bravado, failed to grasp the gravity of the situation. Instead of apologizing or stepping back as instructed, they doubled down, letting their ego take control. "Well, I didn't mean to cause trouble," Alex replied, their voice rising slightly in defensiveness. "But honestly, don't you think you're being a little intense about this? It's just a horse." The second the words left their mouth, Alex regretted them. The guard's posture stiffened visibly, his jaw tightening beneath his helmet. Even the black stallion behind him seemed to sense the shift in energy, stamping its hoof impatiently, as if mirroring its rider's irritation. The crowd, which had been whispering amongst themselves, grew quieter still. Some people exchanged uneasy glances, while others shook their heads disapprovingly. A few parents pulled their children closer, shielding them from what appeared to be an escalating confrontation. Alex, however, remained oblivious to the ripple effect of their behavior. To them, this felt like overreaction, a guard blowing things out of proportion because of one small misstep. What Alex didn't realize was that the guards weren't simply there to pose for photos or entertain tourists. They represented centuries of tradition, discipline, and duty. Each movement they made, each word they spoke, was steeped in respect for their role, and disrespecting that role carried consequences. The guard standing before Alex had likely trained for years to earn his position, mastering everything from horsemanship to crowd control. And here was Alex, treating him like part of a tourist attraction rather than the professional he was. Without another word, the guard closed the remaining distance between them, stopping mere inches away. His towering figure loomed over Alex, whose confidence began to waver under the weight of his piercing gaze. For the first time since the incident began, Alex felt truly vulnerable. They opened their mouth to speak again, perhaps to apologize or explain themselves further, but no words came out. All they could do was stand there, frozen, as the guard prepared to deliver a lesson they would never forget. When Alex finally boarded the plane back home, they carried more than just souvenirs and photos. They brought with them a story that would shape how they viewed the world. The flight gave them plenty of time to reflect, staring out the window at the clouds drifting by as their mind replayed the events of their trip. Vienna had been everything they'd dreamed of. Beautiful, historic, and vibrant. But it had also handed them a lesson they hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the kind of lesson you could learn from books or documentaries. It was raw, immediate, and deeply personal. Back in their small town, life resumed its usual pace. Friends and family eagerly gathered around when Alex returned, expecting tales of grand adventures and picturesque landscapes. And while Alex did share stories of Schönbrunn Palace, the Danube River, and the bustling Naschmarkt, they saved the encounter with the royal guard for last. When they finally recounted the incident, the misstep, the blow, and the humbling aftermath, the room fell silent. Some people chuckled nervously, others winced sympathetically, but everyone listened intently. What struck Alex most was how their tone had changed since the day it happened. At first, they had told themselves they were the victim of an overreaction, someone who had simply made a harmless mistake. But now, recounting the story weeks later, they spoke with clarity and accountability. "I messed up," Alex admitted, looking around the room. "I thought I was entitled to get close, to touch something beautiful without thinking about the consequences. But Vienna taught me that beauty comes with boundaries, and those boundaries exist for a reason." Their honesty resonated with listeners. One friend nodded thoughtfully, saying, "It sounds like you got exactly what you needed, even if it didn't feel good at the time." Another joked, "Well, at least you'll never forget your trip to Vienna." But beneath the laughter, there was a shared understanding. Sometimes, growth comes wrapped in discomfort, and the hardest lessons are often the ones we need most. In the weeks that followed, Alex noticed subtle changes in their behavior. They became more mindful of rules, whether it was waiting patiently in line at the grocery store or double-checking guidelines before visiting a museum. Small acts of respect that once felt optional now seemed essential. Even in conversations, they found themselves listening more and interrupting less, remembering how easily misunderstandings could escalate. The experience in Vienna had planted a seed of awareness that continued to grow, influencing not just how they traveled, but how they interacted with the world. Alex also discovered a new appreciation for tradition and history. Before their trip, they had approached landmarks and ceremonies as mere spectacles, ticking items off a checklist. Now they sought to understand the meaning behind them, the stories, sacrifices, and values they represented. This shift in perspective enriched their experiences, making every outing feel deeper and more meaningful. When friends asked why they suddenly wanted to visit local historical sites or attend cultural events, Alex smiled knowingly. "Vienna changed me," they said simply. "It reminded me that there's always more than meets the eye." As months passed, the memory of the guard's stern expression and the sharp sting of his response stayed vivid in Alex's mind, not as a source of resentment, but as a reminder of accountability. Whenever they caught themselves growing complacent or dismissive, they recalled that moment outside Schönbrunn Palace. It served as a mental checkpoint, urging them to pause and consider their actions before forging ahead. Years later, when Alex looked back on their travels, Vienna remained one of their most cherished destinations, not because it was flawless, but because it was transformative. The city had challenged them, humbled them, and ultimately helped them grow into a more thoughtful, respectful person. Though they never saw the Black Stallion or the Guard again, they often wondered about them, hoping they knew the impact they'd had on one reckless tourist. In the end, Alex realized that true adventure wasn't about collecting perfect moments or escaping unscathed. It was about embracing challenges, learning from mistakes, and carrying those lessons forward. Vienna had given them all of that and more, leaving an indelible mark on their heart. And whenever they faced uncertainty in life, they remembered the guard's words: "Respect the rules, or face the consequences." Simple, powerful, and unforgettable. A mantra for living well, wherever the road might lead. As Alex sat on the bench, nursing their bruised shoulder and wounded pride, they couldn't help but feel like an outsider in a place where everyone else seemed to understand the unspoken rules. The cheerful atmosphere that had once filled the palace grounds now felt distant, replaced by a lingering awkwardness that clung to them like a shadow. Tourists continued to mill about, snapping photos and chatting excitedly, but Alex felt disconnected from it all. They were no longer just another curious traveler. They were the person who had caused a scene. Still seated, Alex glanced around cautiously, half expecting someone to approach and scold them further. But instead, most people simply went about their day, leaving Alex alone with their thoughts. Occasionally, though, a passerby would steal a glance or whisper something to their companion before quickly looking away. It was subtle, but enough to make Alex squirm. Each fleeting look felt like a silent judgment, a reminder of how foolish they must have appeared. Even the children, who earlier had gazed at the horses with wide-eyed wonder, now seemed to regard Alex with a mix of confusion and mild amusement. Unable to sit still any longer, Alex decided to move. They stood up slowly, brushing off imaginary dust from their clothes, as if trying to shake off the embarrassment along with it. With their camera dangling loosely around their neck, they'd wandered aimlessly toward a nearby cafe, hoping that putting some distance between themselves and the incident might ease the knot of shame tightening in their chest. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee greeted them as they stepped inside, offering a small comfort amid the chaos of their emotions. At a corner table, Alex sank into a chair, ordering a strong espresso without even glancing at the menu. As they waited for their drink, they noticed other patrons chatting animatedly, some laughing over shared stories, others scrolling through social media, likely posting pictures of their own perfect day in Vienna. Alex pulled out their phone hesitantly, dreading what they might find online. Sure enough, a quick scroll revealed snippets of the very scene they had hoped to forget. Videos of the mounted guards, comments speculating about that tourist, and even a blurry photo of Alex mid-stumble after the guard's strike. Their stomach churned as they realized their moment of recklessness was now immortalized across platforms, potentially seen by thousands. But it wasn't just the public humiliation that weighed heavily on Alex, it was the realization of how much they didn't know. In their excitement to explore Vienna, they had overlooked the importance of understanding its customs and respecting its traditions. To the locals, the royal guards weren't merely part of a picturesque backdrop. They represented centuries of history, discipline, and cultural pride. By treating them as props for a photo op, Alex had inadvertently insulted not just the guards, but also the values they stood for. A kind waitress set down Alex's coffee, giving them a sympathetic smile that only deepened their sense of guilt. "Rough morning?" she asked gently, her accent melodic yet warm. Alex managed a weak nod, too embarrassed to elaborate. The waitress didn't press further, instead placing the small cookie on the saucer with a reassuring wink. "Vienna has a way of teaching lessons," she said cryptically before walking away. Her words lingered in Alex's mind, sparking a flicker of self-awareness. Sipping the bitter coffee, Alex began to reflect more deeply on the encounter. Yes, they had been humiliated, but perhaps that was exactly what they needed. Back home, they were used to bending rules, skating by on charm and spontaneity. Here, however, those traits had landed them in hot water. Vienna demanded something different: respect, mindfulness, and an appreciation for boundaries. For the first time, Alex started to see their actions through the eyes of the guard and the crowd. What had seemed like harmless curiosity to them was, in truth, a breach of decorum that could have endangered not only themselves but also others. By the time Alex finished their coffee, a strange mix of emotions swirled within them. There was still a sting of embarrassment, yes, but also a growing determination to learn from the experience. They resolved to spend the rest of their trip differently, not as a careless tourist chasing Instagram-worthy moments, but as someone eager to truly understand and honor the culture surrounding them. After all, Vienna had given them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget, and Alex vowed to carry it with them long after they left the city behind. The guard's demeanor shifted subtly, but unmistakably. His earlier patience had evaporated, replaced by a quiet resolve that sent a chill through Alex. Though his face remained impassive behind the helmet, his body language spoke volumes. His shoulders squared, his hands steady, and his feet planted firmly on the ground as if rooted to the spot. The ceremonial sword at his side gleamed faintly in the sunlight, its presence suddenly feeling far less decorative and far more authoritative. Alex swallowed hard, their throat dry, as they realized they were no longer dealing with a polite warning. "You have ignored my instructions," the guard said, his voice low but firm, cutting through the tense silence like a blade. "And you continue to show disrespect for the rules and for this uniform." Each word landed with precision, leaving no room for misinterpretation. To Alex, it felt as though the air itself had grown heavier, pressing down on them with every syllable. They wanted to say something, anything, to diffuse the situation, but their mind was blank, overwhelmed by the realization that they had pushed too far. Without another word, the guard acted. In one fluid motion, he stepped closer, raising his hand, not to strike Alex directly, but to deliver a controlled blow meant to convey authority without causing lasting harm. With practiced skill, he brought the flat of his gloved palm against Alex's shoulder, striking with enough force to knock them slightly off balance. The impact wasn't brutal, but it was sharp and deliberate, a physical reminder of the boundaries Alex had so carelessly crossed. Alex stumbled backward, their camera strap digging into their neck as they reflexively reached up to steady themselves. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Their eyes widened in shock, their cheeks flushed red with embarrassment, and their mouth hung open as if trying to form words but failing completely. The crowd, which had been watching intently, let out a collective gasp. Some people instinctively took a step back, while others exchanged wide-eyed glances, unsure whether to feel sympathy for Alex or admiration for the guard's decisive action. The guard stood tall once more, his composure unshaken. He didn't raise his voice or gloat. Instead, he simply waited for Alex to regain their footing, his expression unreadable beneath the helmet. When Alex finally managed to straighten up, they looked around nervously, acutely aware of how many eyes were on them. Tourists who had moments ago been snapping photos of the mounted patrol were now filming this scene, the awkward, humbling aftermath of Alex's poor decision. A few people even chuckled under their breath, though most remained silent, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. For Alex, the blow carried more than just physical force. It was a wake-up call. They had entered Vienna eager to explore its beauty and history, but somewhere along the way, they had forgotten the importance of respect and responsibility. Standing there, reeling from the unexpected strike, Alex began to understand the gravity of what they had done. This wasn't just about getting too close to a horse or cracking a joke at the wrong time. It was about dismissing boundaries, traditions, and the very real role these guards played in maintaining order. As the initial sting of the blow faded, Alex found themselves grappling with conflicting emotions. Part of them wanted to protest, to argue that the guards' response was excessive. But another part, a quieter, more rational voice, knew deep down that they deserved it. The guard hadn't acted out of anger or malice. He had acted out of duty, sending a clear message that rules exist for a reason. Whether Alex liked it or not, they had become an example, a cautionary tale for anyone else who might think the world revolved around their whims. When the guard finally spoke again, his tone was calm but firm. "This is your final warning," he said, his words carrying a weight that demanded attention. "Respect the rules, or face the consequences." With that, he turned sharply on his heel, returning to his horse, and mounting it with practiced ease. The black stallion snorted softly, as if sensing the resolution of the conflict, before falling back into step with the rest of the patrol. As the guards moved away, the crowd slowly dispersed, though whispers lingered in their wake. Alex stood there for a long moment, still clutching their shoulder, feeling smaller than they ever had before. The encounter was over, but its effects would linger far beyond this day, etched into their memory as a lesson they would never forget. The sharp sting of the guard's blow lingered on Alex's shoulder, but it was nothing compared to the weight of humiliation settling over them. As they stood there, still slightly off balance, their mind raced to process what had just happened. The once exciting morning now felt like a disaster unfolding in slow motion. Tourists who moments ago had been admiring the mounted patrol were now filming them. The clumsy, rule-breaking outsider who had dared to cross a line and paid the price for it. Some people whispered behind cupped hands, while others openly stared, their expressions ranging from sympathy to amusement. Alex felt exposed, as though every eye in Vienna was trained on them. Their face burned with shame, and their ears rang with the sound of hushed voices discussing the scene. "Did you see that?" one woman murmured to her companion, glancing at Alex before quickly looking away. A teenager nearby snickered quietly, nudging his friend and pointing discreetly in Alex's direction. Even the children, who moments earlier had been delighted by the sight of the horses, now seemed to regard Alex with a mix of confusion and pity. It was as if the entire world had conspired to remind Alex of their mistake, all at once, all too publicly. Desperate to escape the spotlight, Alex took a few stumbling steps backward, trying to blend into the crowd. But blending in was impossible. They were the center of attention now, whether they liked it or not. They fumbled with their camera strap, pretending to adjust it, hoping that focusing on something mundane might make them appear less conspicuous. Yet, no matter how hard they tried to act casual, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every movement they made felt exaggerated, every breath louder than it should have been. As the initial shock began to fade, Alex's thoughts turned inward. At first, anger bubbled up. Anger at the guard for reacting so harshly, anger at the crowd for judging them, and even anger at themselves for letting things escalate so quickly. It wasn't that big of a deal, they muttered under their breath, attempting to justify their actions. But deep down, they knew better. The memory of the startled horse, the guard's stern warnings, and the ripple of tension among the bystanders replayed in their mind, each detail reinforcing the truth. They had been reckless, disrespectful, and completely out of line. Still reeling, Alex retreated to a nearby bench, slumping onto it with a defeated sigh. Their camera hung limply around their neck. Forgotten for the moment, they stared blankly at the ground, replaying the incident again and again, dissecting every misstep. Why hadn't they listened when the guard first warned them? Why had they thought it was okay to ignore the signs and push their luck? And why, oh why, had they made that sarcastic comment about the guard being too serious? That last part stung the most. It wasn't just foolish, it was disrespectful, and Alex knew it. To make matters worse, the physical reminder of their blunder remained ever present. The dull ache in their shoulder served as a constant echo of the guard's lesson, grounding them in reality whenever their mind drifted toward denial. Each time they shifted position or accidentally brushed against the sore spot, they were reminded of the power behind that single strike, not just the physical force, but the symbolic message it carried. This wasn't just punishment, it was education. The guard hadn't acted out of cruelty. He had acted out of duty, teaching Alex a lesson they clearly needed to learn. Despite the discomfort, Alex couldn't deny that the experience had left an impression. For all their embarrassment and frustration, they also felt a strange sense of clarity creeping in. Perhaps this was what they needed, a wake-up call delivered in the most unexpected way. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to accept that they weren't the victim here. They had made a series of poor choices, disregarding rules and traditions in favor of their own curiosity. And while the consequences had been painful, in more ways than one, they couldn't argue that they hadn't earned them. As the crowd thinned and the guards disappeared from view, Alex sat alone on the bench, staring at the palace gates in the distance. The grandeur of Schönbrunn Palace still loomed majestically, unchanged by the drama that had unfolded mere minutes ago. Life moved on, indifferent to Alex's personal turmoil. But for Alex, the day would forever be marked by this unforgettable encounter, a vivid reminder that adventure comes with responsibility, and respect is not optional. With their coffee cup empty and their thoughts clearer, Alex stepped out of the cafe, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The sun was still shining brightly over Vienna, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets, but Alex's perspective had shifted. They no longer saw the city as merely a backdrop for their adventures. Instead, they began to notice its layers, the quiet dignity of its traditions, the pride of its people, and the unspoken rules that held everything together. It was time to make amends, not just with the guard or the crowd, but with themselves. Determined to learn more about the mounted guards who had become such an unexpected part of their journey, Alex struck up conversations with locals. At first, they were hesitant, worried that bringing up the incident might invite judgment. But to their surprise, most people responded warmly, eager to share stories about the guard's history and significance. One elderly man, sitting on a park bench feeding pigeons, explained how these units dated back centuries, serving as protectors of royalty and symbols of national pride. "They are not actors," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "They are guardians, honored and respected." Alex listened intently, absorbing every detail. They learned about the rigorous training the guards underwent, mastering horsemanship, etiquette, and crowd control. Each uniform was tailored precisely, each movement choreographed to perfection. Far from being mere figureheads, these men and women carried immense responsibility, balancing tradition with modern-day duties. For the first time, Alex understood why the guard hadn't hesitated to act when provoked. He wasn't just enforcing rules, he was upholding a legacy. Feeling a pang of remorse, Alex decided to visit a small museum near the palace dedicated to the history of the royal guards. Inside, displays showcased vintage uniforms, antique sabers, and black and white photographs of past patrols. Reading the plaques and studying the artifacts, Alex felt a deep appreciation for the sacrifices and discipline required to serve in such a role. A particular exhibit caught their attention, a quote etched into the wall, attributed to an anonymous guard. It read, "Respect is earned through respect given." Those simple words resonated deeply, reminding Alex of their own failure to extend basic courtesy earlier that day. By evening, Alex returned to their hotel room, exhausted but reflective. Sitting by the window overlooking the city lights, they opened their journal, a habit they rarely kept but suddenly felt compelled to revisit. With pen in hand, they began writing about the day's events, pouring out their emotions onto the page. At first, the words came haltingly, tinged with frustration and embarrassment. But as they wrote, their tone softened, shifting from self-pity to gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson, however harsh, that had forced them to confront their behavior. Gratitude for the beauty of Vienna, which had taught them humility. And gratitude for the guard, whose actions, though painful, had been necessary. The next morning, Alex woke up with a fresh resolve. Instead of rushing off to another tourist hotspot, they took their time, observing the little details they had previously overlooked. They noticed how shopkeepers greeted customers with warm smiles, how street musicians played with genuine passion, and how families strolled leisurely, savoring each moment. Even the signs warning visitors to keep their distance now seemed less like restrictions and more like invitations to participate respectfully in the city's rhythm. When Alex finally mustered the courage to return to Schönbrunn Palace later that afternoon, they did so with a newfound reverence. This time, they stayed behind the barriers, admiring the mounted guards from afar without attempting to intrude. As one patrol passed by, Alex locked eyes briefly with a guard, unsure if it was the same one from before. Whether it was or wasn't, they nodded slightly, offering a silent apology. To their relief, the guard gave a curt nod in return, a gesture that felt like forgiveness, or at least acknowledgement. Over the following days, Alex continued exploring Vienna with a changed mindset. They asked questions, listened attentively, and soaked in the culture with humility rather than entitlement. When they returned home, they shared their story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to growth. Friends and family listened intently as Alex recounted the encounter with the guard, emphasizing the importance of respecting boundaries and traditions, even in unfamiliar settings. Looking back, Alex realized the blow they had received wasn't just physical, it was transformative. It had knocked them off their pedestal of arrogance and forced them to see the world through a wider lens. Vienna had challenged them, humbled them, and ultimately shaped them into someone better equipped to navigate life's complexities. And